I was so used to eating fresh food and eating things that were picked naturally. Tell us about Jubilee Farms and what is it?
And we're going to have, when all is said and done, about 200 fish swimming in those tanks. We're putting it in the basement of an affordable housing building and on the rooftop. So they've designed this custom plan for us.
Thank you, Tim. I'm glad you're back, and we have on the same clothes that we had
we do.
The first time we recorded
right.
the podcast, part one. But thank you and welcome to Jubilee on Air. We're talking with Tim Tutt about Jubilee Farms.
I'm glad to be a part of part two of this conversation.
Thank you. So how does this look? 3 months in, 6 months in. If you want to go to a year in, you can.
Right.
But, yeah, how's this farm going to function that's in the basement and on the rooftop?
That's a great question. So let me back up and talk about the philosophy of it. It's an experiment, right?
Okay.
As near as we can tell, no one else in the country is doing what we intend to do with the Jubilee Farms with all these various parts. We have the aquaponics farm. It's connected to an affordable housing building. It's a workforce development site for people coming back from incarceration. And we hope it's a profit-generating experience for Jubilee Housing when we reach that. To our knowledge, there are people doing parts of this and people doing really creative things with reentry support and with aquaponics farming and affordable housing, but I think we're the only people putting this all together. So it's an experiment, first of all. What I think it might look like in 3 to 6 months or a year may not be at all what it looks like. And so one of the things that's been really interesting as I've talked to Jim Knight, our CEO, and others, is the idea that this is an experiment, that we're being entrepreneurial. What we think will happen may not happen. And so we're trying to be nimble and flexible with this. If it doesn't work the way we think it might, then we're trying to find ways that we can change and grow as it goes on. But what we think might work, right? So the building is under construction right now. Should be finished mid to late August, and we'll get the occupancy permits for the building, which means we can then install the farm equipment, install the actual aquaponics system in the basement and on the rooftop. So that will happen, for lack of a better date, let's just say September the 1st, right? Everything's built and ready to go. Then you put the fish in the tanks, and it takes the koi a little while to become acclimated. We want them to be happy in their new homes.
Happy fish.
I talked with a professor at NYU who's doing some research around fish, and her question was, have you considered the welfare of the fish? Happy fish produce poop that is healthier than unhappy fish do. And so we want happy fish.
We want happy fish. We want happy fish.
Yeah. Just like we want happy people and happy plants and everything. So the fish will become acclimated to the water and their diet will get balanced, and we'll feed them and sing songs to them, tend to them. And then about 6 weeks after that, we can begin to plant the first towers of plants. So let's use kale as an example. We'll use the little seeds and we'll pop the kale in. It will take about 6 weeks to grow, and we'll harvest our first crops. So we're looking at a September, October construction time frame, an October, November, make the fish happy time frame, a November, December, plant the first crops time frame. It would be really nice if, say, around Christmas or New Year's, we can have a celebration, harvest the first crop, and everyone can bring their fork and we can see how great it tastes. So that's the next 6 months.
Okay.
Once we plant the first crop, we'll then increase. We're going to start small because we want to make sure we know what we're doing, right? We'll then increase the number of things that we're planting, and every week we'll add to that. We can't just plant a crop and harvest it in 6 weeks because that's not going to work for the people who are relying on our food. They don't want kale every 6 weeks or turnips every 6 weeks. They're going to want that every week, right?
Yeah.
So we'll plant incrementally week by week with that 6 week harvest in mind and expand that over the next year or so, let's say, until we get to full capacity. It might, we've never done this before. Sure. I don't know. So I think what we're looking at is full capacity, I say 3 years. It could be sooner. We don't want to rush and make mistakes and ruin the fish. We don't want to ruin the harvest. We don't want to ruin the equipment. So we'll figure that out over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, that's a great outlook and kind of picture into what's going to happen. I want to shout out Tyrell from the last podcast because he said that we would have fresh kale to eat soon. And
that's kale in town, they're saying it's going to be.
Oh, Shout out to you, Tyrell. We will have fresh kale soon. And
We will have fresh kale. We don't know exactly what day that is, so make sure your forks are clean and ready to go. But we will.
but we will.
We don't know exactly the date, and we don't know exactly how much on that first harvest, and we don't know exactly who will plant and grow it yet. But we will. We will.
But that's the exciting part of it. And I love that you're being nimble, you're going to be flexible, you're going to have that entrepreneurial spirit, knowing that everything may not go as planned.
Right.
That is typically what happens in pretty much anything.
In anything. But I mean, farming in particular, right? If you're a traditional outdoor farmer, you never know if you're going to have enough rain or too much rain, or the sun won't shine, or the birds will come along and eat your seeds, or whatever it is, right? And so farming, we know, is precarious business. We're taking out some of those possibilities by having this in this controlled sort of closed loop system that's internal. So we'll have a little more control over that. But again, you never know. The other piece that's a real unknown is the farm is a workforce development site for our residents who are coming out of incarceration. We recognize that that's a population that needs homes and needs job training, and we want to do that well. But we don't know what their needs might be. You know, someone may come out of incarceration and live in one of our buildings, and in a week they decide that they have a great opportunity to go live with a family member in Topeka, Kansas or something, and that's where they're going to thrive. And so that person won't be farming, right? And so this may not work for everyone's schedule. We also recognize that many of our residents who are coming out of incarceration already have full-time jobs or other commitments, sometimes court-ordered, sometimes just things they need to do to sort of get their lives back on track. So they may not be available to be the workforce all the time. So we're trying to figure out how to offer this as a possibility that enriches the lives as a workforce experience for people coming out of incarceration. That's not an extra burden to their already complicated lives. We want it to be something that feels right for them. It's in the building they're living in. It's producing food for their own table in their own kitchen, which is great. I think it will resonate with some of the people coming out of incarceration. Others, maybe they're going to go be an electrician or a medical tech. We don't know. So we have this as an option. So we're not quite sure what the workforce team will look like.
Okay.
And so we're trying to be flexible in that regard as well. So there are lots of unknowns is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Which is perfect for this. I'm just making sure this is working. So the next question I have for you is, what does success look like with all these unknowns?
All these unknowns and also all of these goals. Success is several things. Let's say that. First of all, if we just produce some crops, right? The very first time, I just want something to grow that we can harvest and eat and taste it and be like, we did that, right? So that's one level of success. The next level of success would be if some of these residents coming out of incarceration, or all of them, right, find that that's meaningful work that they're doing, and they're able to say, hey, I learned how to monitor this system. I learned how to harvest these crops. I learned how to deliver it to a farmer's market. I learned how to sell it. If 1 or 2 or 10 or 20 of them were able to say, that helped me on the pathway to job security, that's a sign of success as well. We're also producing these crops to sell through CSA delivery boxes, some to our residents in Ontario Place, one of our Jubilee Housing properties, other residents in Jubilee, and then just to our neighbors. So another sign of success will be if a neighbor, someone who doesn't live in Jubilee Housing, is buying a CSA delivery box through a subscription, and they're able to say, wow, every week or every 2 weeks or whatever it is, I'm getting cucumbers, tomatoes, onions, and kale from Jubilee Farms, and I really enjoy it. It's really good. So that will help the ecosystem, our nutrition, our farming system, all that kind of thing. The average vegetable going to the average American's plate, you look pretty average. I mean, you and I, we're way above average.
Am I just average, Tim? Oh my God, I am.
You're just average. We're above
I'm
average.
hurt.
The average vegetable travels 1,500 miles to get to the average American's plate. That's a lot of transportation. That's a lot of fossil fuel being used by jets and those things, or trains or planes or whatever. So one of the things we're doing is helping the environment. So when that person eats that produce that was grown in their neighborhood, and they can say it really tasted better than something that was picked unripe off a vine ripened and then transported all the way to DC from wherever it came from. I think we're going to produce better tasting things. So that's a level of success too. And then to go back to meaning making, I really want people to look around at the farm and say, this is a pretty place. This feels like something that is life-giving in the midst of the city, in the midst of a world that's kind of chaotic. So those are different ways of measuring success.
But yeah, all good ways. And, even though I'm average, Tim, I'm not going to take offense to it. I am going to go with it. I am.
I mean, average is pretty good, right? Average is pretty
great.
good. Average is pretty good.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I want to make sure I'm touching on all the things.
While you're looking at your notes, let me go back to one other thing that we're trying to figure out how to measure. And that is the health of the people who are coming out of incarceration. So we have this building, I keep referring to the KEB building. That's a residence for 18 people who are coming immediately out of incarceration to live in this very supportive facility, wraparound services, good staff, all those things. They will be the people who ideally are working the farm. What we hope to be able to measure in some kind of way that is respectful and caring of them is what's their health like when they show up. Physical health, mental health, emotional, spiritual, psychological, social, all those things. And then in what ways does working in a farm, an active, lively, plant growing farm, in what ways does that nurture their health? Do they feel better about themselves? Are they physically healthier because they're eating better food? I had a conversation last week with some people who had been in the DC justice system, and they were talking about the food that's served in jail is not always the healthiest stuff, right? So my hunch is they're going to come out of incarceration with some unhealthy eating habits that nobody wants. So what will eating fresh produce do for their health? What will tending the farm do for their emotional health and their spiritual and social well-being? So we're trying to find ways to measure all that. So there will be some measurable successes that we hope as well. So I'm really curious to see how the farm is a place of health and well-being for the people who are tending the farm and for everyone.
This is truly an experiment that is, or an entrepreneurial in nature, but it's something that is going to be testing a lot of maybe theories, hypotheses around what this farm could bring to people's lives and the kind of energy and support and everything else. So we will probably need to come back together to talk about that and to say, hey, these are the things that are working well. This is what we're finding based on the first 6 months, maybe year. But I think this is a conversation that we have to come back to because of all of the things that you're trying to test in this too.
So I would say let's come back and do 2 other podcasts. Let's do one where we just talk about what it's like. And let's do a third one that's a cooking show. Because while I love fresh vegetables and farming, I really like to eat. I mean, let's just be honest, right? And so I think we can take the tomatoes and make salsa. I mentioned my grandparents as farmers. My grandmother had a great salsa recipe that I would love to make on air with you. And then we can bring in some chips or something. And
that's
have
what
some
I'm
salsa.
talking about.
We've talked about taking the basil and making pesto. So let's have a talking show where we talk about the successes, and let's have a cooking podcast. How's that?
Let's do it because I like to eat too.
Excellent.
And I love salsa.
I'm an above average eater, by the way. I don't know.
It's about to say now, we're going to go into above average eating, and I do like to eat. So I will say that. So I guess last thing, what else can you say? I mean, listen, this is very interesting. There's so much that we could talk about here, but I want to be conscious of time and just other people's capacity for this.
Yes.
But yeah, tell me, what else do you want to share about Jubilee Farms that other people might find interesting, or maybe I didn't ask you and that you want to touch on?
So the thing that I would share is the enthusiasm that I've run across from every single person that I've talked to about this. So I've talked to grant making organizations that do big gifts all around the country and maybe even around the world. I've talked to some of our residents who are coming out of incarceration. I've talked to neighbors who live in apartment buildings nearby. I talked to the owner of a small grocery store not far away who may want to buy some of our crops. Every single person is excited about this. Some of the people respond to the sustainable agriculture. They're like, that's better for the environment. Some respond to the affordable housing. Some respond to the workforce for people coming out of incarceration. And some respond to just the potential of great food around the block. But everyone I've talked to is very excited about this. I've not met anyone who's like, well, that's a stupid idea, right? Some people are curious and they say, what about this and what about that? But everyone is excited about the multiplicities of possibilities with this. And I would say that the funders, we've had some very generous foundations fund this. We do hope to get to profitability in 3 years. We're not there now. And so we're looking for partners, individuals, corporations, foundations who want to support this, who say that's worth experimenting with. In this current political climate, in this current complicated days, we need to try new things. Maybe one of the things we're realizing is the old ways aren't always working for us. And so if anyone is watching this or listening to this and they want to be a part of this, donations, I hate to ask for money right up front, but the money to make this work over the next year is going to be really important. People have been very generous so far, so I just want to say thank you and encourage people to do that. Lots of people have asked in their enthusiasm, how can they be part? I'm not sure that we're going to have room for all the people who've said they want to volunteer to be in the greenhouses, because that would be hundreds of people so far. But we will need volunteers to spread the word about this, to sign up for the CSA delivery boxes, maybe to volunteer at farmers markets to sell the crops. So a way to channel that enthusiasm into hands-on work would be great. So anyone can reach out to me. But mainly, I would say the enthusiasm for creative thinking is the thing I wanted to share as an answer to your final question. That's the thing that's been overwhelming. And you know that. You've seen that through your work and talking with other people about it as well. But it's just been really gratifying for people to say, that's really cool. That's really creative. I want to be a part of that and I want to support that. So I'm grateful for that sort of outpouring of support.
I have one more question.
All right, then.
What does the managing director of Jubilee Farms do?
What do I do?
Tell me, what do you do? Are you going to have on your overalls?
I do only podcast with great podcast hosts. That's all I do. I mean, a lot of what I've done has been to set up the corporate structure over the past year or so to make the project work. Jubilee Farms is its own LLC. We don't need to go into the legality. So we've done some legal setup. You guys have been great. My colleagues have been great. Things like the logo and branding. We had to do all that stuff because it didn't start. The building is under construction, so there've been conversations ongoing about this and that and measurements and all those kind of things, some logistical things. A lot of what I've done is just talk to individuals about funding support. So it's really been this startup kind of work. What I will actually do is actually farm, right? Again, I won't be outside sweating all day long like my grandparents and your grandparents were, because it's a different thing. But I really look forward to wearing shorts and a t-shirt to work every day, or jeans and a t-shirt, and really making sure that our fish are happy, right? Tending to the fish, singing to the fish, harvesting the crops, the actual work. And there'll be other staff. Another Jubilee staffer will be working with me on this, and then we'll have the residents coming out of incarceration. So we'll be managing a staff of 10 or 20 residents and volunteers. So it's one of the reasons I like the job, is there are all these different parts to it. And so I get to sort of use different parts of my brain, and we'll get to use different parts of my fingers as we harvest the crops as well.
I'm going to make one or two final points, just kind of thinking about the last podcast, our inaugural podcast with Tyrell, and how his childhood, and of course we know this, how much it influences what we do in our life, and also kind of our passion and how we live that out. So I enjoyed that so much. And this is maybe a theme as we move on and do other podcasts.
Can I tell you a story in that regard? So I listened to Tyrell's podcast, and he had that great experience about some traumatic events in his neighborhood and his life that propelled him to be involved in changing systems and structures for the good. It was really, really good. So thank you for the conversation you had with him. My grandfather, Tutt, was the farmer, the main farming example in my life. My dad, too. But my grandfather, I worked for him on the farm most of my summers in like high school, right? He hardly talked. He was a great guy. He was really funny, very quiet, and certainly not demonstrative in the way he would not have protested at marches. He was not a picketer, social justice kind of person,
sure.
but he was a very kind, very generous individual. And so he would go out into his garden in the mornings, and he would pick the tomatoes, let's say, right? And he would put them in sacks. And maybe on that day, he might have like 5 paper sacks of tomatoes. Well, he and my grandmother were not going to eat that many tomatoes, and you can only give away that much. And so he would put them in these sacks, and then he would say, "Get in the truck." Like I said, he hardly ever get in the truck. He would never say where we're going. And he would then drive around in the country, outside of our hometown. And he talked about delivering the tomatoes to, and I'll use his phrase, my widow women is what he called them. Women, and this was a different era, right? So we're talking the mid and early 1980s, which is I have to say it's a long time ago now, right? Showing my age. There were farm families in rural East Texas. Lots of the women outlived their husbands. That's just how it worked. And these women were elderly, and they had these farming experiences, and they could no longer grow their own tomatoes or their own watermelon or their own potatoes. And my grandfather would just quietly get in the truck. I never knew how he picked who he was going to take the tomatoes to, right? But he would just drive around and pull up in someone's driveway and have me get out and run and just put the sack of tomatoes on the front porch. Didn't ring the doorbell, didn't say this is who it's from. I'm sure they knew. That's a way of being involved in the world. That's a way of caring for other people in a very quiet, very low key, but very generous way. That's something of what we're doing with Jubilee Farms.
Yes.
Right. And so those experiences from my childhood of just sitting in the truck with my grandfather, and running those tomatoes or potatoes or whatever up to someone's front porch shaped me to think about just how we live in the world. Right? How we care for the people around us. I don't have widow women in my life like my grandfather did necessarily, but there are lots of people around us who need that help, whether it's fresh food, affordable housing, job training. So this is just an extension of what I learned as an 8-year-old growing up in Longview, Texas.
That is a great story and a great way to end this on air with Jubilee Housing. Thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you, Jennifer. And so we know that people need housing for sure. They also need access to good food. And yes, there are grocery stores around here. We know that. But we are, through Jubilee Farms, just offering another way for people to have good food on their tables.